Our first guest tonight to discuss the America First message that President Trump will take to the United Nations next week, his pledge to eradicate radical Islamic terrorism, military options that are his in North Korea, and the role that establishment leaders in Congress have played in obstructing and undermining Mr. Trump's agenda. Joining us tonight, Congressman Trent Franks. He's a member of both the Armed Services Committee and Judiciary Committees. And Congressman, it's good to have you with us. The options.
Always love being on with you.
Well, we appreciate you being here. The options the president has in North Korea, all of them are tough choices. And Kim Jong-un shows no sign, nor does President Xi Jinping, of making Mr. Trump's choices any more attractive.
Well, that's true. You know, I've said many times that previous presidents, and namely Mr. Clinton and Mr. Obama, both paid the ransom to North Korea and yet did not secure the hostage. They did not build down or dismantle the capability. And now this president is faced with far fewer options that are much more grave. That said, I will tell you that he is hitting dead center on one important point, and that is that deterrent is always in the mind of your aggressor or your opponent. And if there's one absolute imperative for North Korea, that is the survival of the present regime. And President Trump has made it very clear, if any of their missiles become on ballistic arc or trajectory to potentially threaten American citizens, that the response would be capable of obliterating that regime. And if that's clear in their mind, it is a tremendous deterrent. And I congratulate for the president for that kind of clarity. No matter what kind of words it's put in, even if they're not diplomatic ease, his commitment there is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I think in that context, the president, in fact, I think, as you well know, has made it clear that that threat on his part, his promise, if you will, extends to our allies and our friends in the region. And now we've seen the second ballistic missile, this one, by the way, capable of reaching Guam. We've seen the second one fly over Japan in short order. This can't go on, can it?
It cannot. It's absolutely critical, Lou, that at the end of this exchange, that in the final analysis, that this capability that North Korea has is dismantled and this regime is changed, because it will only get worse. If you look at the threat that this lunatic in North Korea made about potentially hitting the United States with an electromagnetic pulse, and the fact that they are now saying that they have thermonuclear capability, and the yield of those weapons indicate that they're probably telling the truth, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 kilotons. All of a sudden, and that's a magnitude of 150 kilotons is probably 8 or 10 times the size of what we dropped on Hiroshima.
You talked
about...
And that
means that we...
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That means that they now have expressed an intent, and they now have indicated that their capability is in place. Those are significant new things, and they are the primary components to any threat.
There is an established order under all of this, and that is enabling Kim Jong-un and his entire regime is President Xi Jinping and the Chinese government. Yes. And there is no sugarcoating this. The Chinese will be just as responsible as Kim Jong-un if one thing goes wrong, or if he decides to fire a missile at South Korea, or tries to fire a missile and hit Japan, or Guam, or any one of our allies. President Xi Jinping, it seems to me, it should be very clear, should be held every bit as responsible as Kim Jong-un for what transpires.
Absolutely. They will be culpable by the act of just the way that they have supported this regime. And I think it's important, and I think the president may move in this direction. We've talked about additional sanctions, and the UN didn't really give the kind of sanctions we really need. But we should make it very clear to China. Are there
really sanctions that matter here? There are no sanctions beyond what can be sanctioned on the part of China. If we sanction China, and curtail or constrain or eliminate its trade with the West, those are effective sanctions. But to talk about
I guess that's what I'm
sanctioning
saying,
a country that is on already subsistence level diet and offering very little for its people other than more oppression, I see no reason for sanctions.
That's a tragic thing, and it hurts me terribly for the North Korean people. I would only suggest to you that our economy is 1,000 times the size of North Korea, and if we tell China you can trade with North Korea or you can trade with us, but not both, I think that is one of the things that we can do. And then we absolutely have to isolate them in every other way possible till the regime itself collapses. It has to happen that way, because otherwise we are on trajectory for a very serious confrontation.
Yeah, and I think that that we need to keep in full view the real consequences here, because China must bear the brunt of those consequences, the impact of those consequences, because it has created this monster in Pyongyang.
That's right.
And we have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it as well in Beijing. Congressman?
Well, there's a little...
Yes, sir.
A little over a dozen companies in China that give them about 80%, 85% of their trade, and you were exactly right, Lou.